at this point is where everything goes down. And so really, I don't need a website.
For those of us that don't know, Substack is a free service, or you're paying? What exactly are you paying for if you use this service? Maybe
nothing. It's completely free for writers. It's a newsletter service. You set up your own newsletter. You cultivate an audience. You can do, regular newsletter posts that are just text. You can do podcasts. They now have a video feature. They have sections, like you can set up multiple podcasts, which I'm in the process of doing. So one of my sections is texting for the podcast that's already going. And then I'm in the process of setting up another podcast called Books Are Burning. And I want to have you on for that. Like, we just read the same book, or it could be a book we've both read before, and then we just get on and talk about it for whatever, half an hour, an hour and a half. And then a third one I want to set up called Guitar and Pen, and that's just my songwriters podcast. And that'll, what's the tagline? The one for Books Are Burning is book reviews, author interviews, and more. So for Guitar and Pen, it'll be something like album and song reviews, musician interviews, and more, something like that. But anything music related will be can be heard on the Guitar and Pen podcast, coming who knows when, soon. One thing at a time.
Definitely.
But I've been planning this for a while.
Would you say you've got the podcast bug now that you've been on this show a couple of times, and we've talked about various projects, but now you're out there on your own with Tomek, and have you've been bitten by the podcast bug?
I guess, the texting we do every week, and like that's a commitment. We've agreed we're going to release a weekly episode. Some weeks we record 2 or 3, and then we can take a week or 2 off, but we release every week. He releases his Sunday Moscow time or St. Petersburg time. I release mine Monday Taipei time. So every week there's a new episode of texting. With these other 2, what I've committed to in my newsletter, to the audience I have there, that's just like sporadic releases. Like whenever I get around to it, I'll release a new episode of Books Are Burning. I'll release a new episode of Guitar and Pen. So that's just like, as I finish them, I'll put them out. So there's not, the same kind of pressure there, because there are other things going on, If I couldn't do one a week, that would just be too crazy.
Never say never, man, right? So it's
yeah, eventually, but as things are now, if status quo stays as it is, I don't see how I could do that. But you're right, it could happen. We'll see how it goes. But for now, texting weekly, and the other 2 when I get around to it.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the commitment part, and I had a few months off this year. I can't remember, from January till just a few weeks ago. So yeah, like 8 months off. And there might come a point when you just, for whatever reason, you've kind of had a wee burnout or something, and you just want to kind of clear the decks, and then you're ready to go again when the time's right. So
yeah,
it's all about not putting pressure on yourself, I found too.
Well, I've thought about that. Like, are we really going to do it every week from here to eternity? I mean, maybe like after 50, we'll say, okay, that's the end of season 1, and we're going to take a month off or something. I don't know. But now it's enjoyable. Like it's fun. Yesterday we recorded an episode on this. You can probably imagine this was my choice, but it was the Sex Pistols' "God Save the Queen," and so I wanted to for obvious reasons, right? Like Lizzie in a box, as you said. So I thought, let's revisit this and see what relevance it has now. And it was new to him. He had never like listened to it. It was pretty much his first exposure to punk and the Sex Pistols and that song in particular. So, we look at the lyrics, we talk about the music, and then it just goes everywhere, like the monarchy, punk as a cultural phenomenon. What else do we talk about? My punk origin story, his punk origin story, punk in relation to classic rock of the 60s, and, Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood, and on and on.
Have you seen that show? What's it called? It's the dramatization of the Pistols, basically. It was on Disney or Disney Plus.
The one that Lydon disowned, he said.
Yeah, right. Everyone else is kind of on board with it. Danny Boyle directed it.
I haven't. I heard about it. I don't know good. If I want to see it.
I enjoyed it.
It is? Okay.
No, yeah, I enjoyed it. There was some bits in it you're just like, oh, behave, and it's just, you're like, really? Come on, But for the most part, I would say it was pretty good. Performances were good, really good. In a musical point of view as well, enjoyed it.
Well, was it documentary, or they like recreated?
No, it's a dramatization. So it's like a dramatization of Steve Jones's autobiography.
I see. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would watch it. I've seen all kinds of rock biopics. Some of them couldn't possibly be. I mean, this couldn't possibly be worse than some of the biopics I've watched. So why not? Did you watch the Peter Jackson Get Back series on Disney? That was also Disney.
Yeah,
that was great, wasn't it?
Just from a kind of slightly surreal point of view as well, because they're all just kind of sitting in that big, was it an aircraft hangar or a big giant warehouse? And they're kind of like, all right, let's pick up a guitar and see how
Twickenham Studios. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a movie set place. I forget, but it's a huge big place, and the guys bringing them in cups of tea and all that kind of stuff. And it was definitely a different time and a different vibe, but quite fascinating to see how they put all that stuff together under time restraints, or, working under that pressure. They didn't seem to be under that much pressure. Right?
Well, there were just some amazing moments, like the way Paul basically conjures Get Back out of nothing. He's just, you just see him create.
You think it's a wind-up, right? You think someone, you're like, come on, really? No, but that's it, man.
It's amazing. But, maybe it's for people who are Beatleologists to the extreme, like me, like have an unhealthy obsession with the Beatles. So it's not for everyone.
No. Well, you have to invest a certain amount of time in it as well, right? And there's periods where maybe you're just a bit like, okay, everything's a bit beige, and the clothes are a bit rubbish, and everyone's smoking all the time, and it's kind of quite bizarre, but in a really good way. I mean, when you put all that together and then you see the end results and the magic they were making.